We have been covering May Day protests across the country, demonstrations against Trump administration policies, including on immigration. They are playing out across the United States. CNN's Danny Freeman is joining us from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, clearly amid the crowd there. Danny, what have you seen?
Yeah, Casey, frankly, today here in Philadelphia and across the country, a lot of lively crowds. We're right here in front of City Hall, and we're actually watching Bernie Sanders, who's been speaking at the microphone for a number of minutes right now. He has been rallying folks here. This event here in Philadelphia is sponsored by the AFL-CIO. He's been speaking very strongly in favor of unions, in favor of workers' rights as well. And then the past, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes, he's been returning to the refrain that we've heard him and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congressman from New York, speak about for a number of weeks now. He's talking about the perils and dangers of the oligarchy. And that really tells you, Casey, a lot about what the tone of these rallies have been, not only here but across the country. A lot of people here, not just to support unions and labor movements, but also a lot of people here clearly voicing their frustration at President Donald Trump and the Trump administration. I won't go too far out just because there's a lot of profanity on the signs here, but I'm seeing a lot of signs. I'm a history teacher. This is fascism. I'm seeing signs for due process. Stop Trump and stop the oligarchs. These are the kind of scenes that we're seeing, again, not just here in Philadelphia, but all across the country today in honor of May Day. I'll just tell you right now, there are a couple thousand people out here. This is a pretty big crowd when it comes to Philadelphia rallies. I've been to a number of them. Clearly, Bernie Sanders is one of the main draws here. And a lot of people were telling me earlier that the reason they came here is not just to support Bernie Sanders, not just to make their voices heard against the Trump administration, but also to show that they are here, they are not afraid, and they are willing to take to the streets specifically to make their voices heard when it comes to, again, protesting the Trump administration. So this rally, like I said, you just saw Bernie Sanders. He just walked up the stage. The rally here is going to continue likely for about an hour or two more. A lot of people here at the moment, and we're expecting more rallies and protests throughout the evening and afternoon. Again, not just here, but also across the country, Casey.
All right, Danny Freeman, with whom I have stood in countless crowds listening to Bernie Sanders speak. Our viewers probably don't know that, Danny, but we covered the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign together. Thanks you to Danny. Congresswoman, this, of course, at your party, saw a lot in that crowd, flags for Palestine, but also, of course, anti-Trump. As Danny noted, a lot of people out there for Bernie Sanders. Which leaders in the Democratic Party do you think have it right now in terms of pushing back against Donald Trump?
It's a good question, and I'll be honest, I'm really proud of House Democrats. I think that we have done a really, making sure that we're talking about all the issues, holding them accountable in the markups we're having for this budget resolution. I like to tell my constituents that we're playing zone defense, not man-to-man, right? So it's not necessarily each individual Democrat doing everything, but all together, we're pushing back on every front.
Obama said it before he ran in 2008.
Not running now. But I'm fine if they all wait and nobody runs. We keep showing footage of those protests. When you're an old hippie, the 1960s never end. And that's what you see when you see these Democrat they protest for the same reason college kids like keg parties, because it's cheap fun. And so I hope they keep doing it. Independents hate protests. They hate Hamas. They hate Bernie Sanders. Bring it on.
I do think that Democrats are in a tough spot right now because their own voters are saying we want more aggressive pushback against the Trump administration. And when you're the party out of power, what does that look like? Does it look like more aggressive tactics? Does it look like an ideological move to the left to fire up the base? These are the challenges any party out of power is trying to sort through, and Democrats really are.
Messy right now.
Crowds are gathering across the US right now with many anti-Trump protesters marking May Day. These are the scenes here in Seattle, Washington, and there you can see people gathered with banners. And also we can see scenes from Atlanta, Georgia here. Outside the state capitol, just in front of you there, you can see above the grass as they mark May Day. Earlier, thousands marched in Chicago. This all stems from a movement which sprang out of a Reddit forum called 50501. The group has held numerous protests in recent weeks. The family of deportee Kilmar Abrigo Garcia appeared at the demonstration in Washington a little earlier.
You know, one thing that was definitely different about this weekend's big day of protest against Trump is that this time the protests got a lot of mainstream media coverage. I don't know if the protests a couple of weeks ago were like a surprise to the headline writers and newsrooms of America's major news outlets, but for whatever reason, a couple of weeks ago, that huge day of protest was really kind of played down or just underplayed somehow in the mainstream press. That definitely turned around for the protest this weekend. Headline, New York Times, shame. Protesters nationwide rally again to condemn Trump policies. Thousands of demonstrators rallied at hundreds of events on Saturday to speak out against the president's handling of immigration, civil liberties, job cuts, and many other issues. The Times front-paged protest photos and protest signs like these ones, for sale, democracy, and resist, if not now, when, and arrest the kidnappers. Headline, Washington Post, 50-51 protests rally small towns and big cities against Trump policies. Protesters gathered in hundreds of rallies across the country to denounce President Donald Trump. The Washington Post and its coverage front-paged a big crowd in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Monument, including this sign front and center, innocent until proven guilty. Headline, the Associated Press, anti-Trump protesters rally in New York, Washington, and elsewhere across the country. Elsewhere is doing a lot of work in that headline, given how many protests there were. But the AP front paged this big banner outside the White House fence, Trump must go now, next to a sign that says Free Kilmar, for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Headline, USA Today, nationwide hands-off 50-51 protests against Trump continue for second weekend. They front-paged this upside-down American flag in the foreground, hanging, of course, in a way to signify distress. And then you can see the signs there, no king, and impeach, remove, imprison. Headline, CNN, protesters denounce Trump administration in nationwide rallies while supporting impacted communities. Here's the Boston Globe. No kings. Anti-Trump demonstrations around Boston invoke American Revolution. Here's the BBC. Thousands join anti-Trump protests across U.S. Front paging this. This is a good sign. I've only ever seen this once. Don't piratize Social Security. That's very well done. Here's The Guardian, which is also based in Britain. Protesters filled the streets in cities across the U.S. to denounce Trump agenda. Here's Reuters, the news service. Thousands of protesters rally against Trump across the United States. Here's Bloomberg. Anti-Trump protesters turn out from New York City to San Francisco, and may I suggest, everywhere in between. Here's CBS News. Anti-Trump rallies held across the U.S. to protest administration's policies. Here's NPR. Protesters unite against Trump in hundreds of rallies across the U.S. No more tariffs on the sign there. Here's the LA Times. Anti-Trump protesters rally again in cities across the country. Impeach and remove being spelled out in bodies on the beach on the front page of the LA Times. This was the lead story on NBC Nightly News on Saturday night. You see the chyron there at the bottom, massive anti-Trump protests across the country.
Tonight, protests across the country, from Denver to Midtown Manhattan to right outside the White House, people voicing anger at the Trump administration, including over its recent immigration actions.
I don't know if the mainstream media catching up now to what's been going on in the streets, I don't know if it's a big advance for that movement against Trump or not. But it's at least worth noting that it is starting to happen. It really hadn't been happening before, and it is now. The coverage is now there. That said, judging from the literally hundreds of protest videos and images that we reviewed over the weekend and compiled, my sense is that the momentum is here, and these protests are going to keep happening basically everywhere, regardless of the level of coverage they get, even though they are now getting more coverage. These are hard to put together, but we've done it. Okay, from left to right and then top to bottom, what you're looking at here is, ready? Anti-Trump protests this weekend in Chicago, Minneapolis, Anchorage. There was a whole bunch of protests in Alaska this weekend. We'll talk about that in a second, but that's Anchorage, third from the left in the middle there on the top row. Then Jacksonville, Florida, Buffalo, New York, Atlanta, Philly, Portland, Oregon, Little Rock, Arkansas, Omaha, of course, New York City, massive crowds in New York City, Denver, Houston, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, Ohio, Salt Lake City, Boise, Idaho, Hartford, Connecticut, and then the last two there, Indianapolis and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I paused there on Anchorage because they really did have a very big crowd in Anchorage this weekend. Thousands of people turned out in Anchorage. And you see some of the signs there, quite good. Due process is a right, not a privilege. There's the big one there up on the right that just says, nope. This is a very good one, actually. It's the only time I've seen this exact phrasing. Only caring about your own rights is exactly how you lose them. That's very good. Orange sign just to the right of that. Nixon and McCarthy weren't this bad. I agree. You may also see another one on the left there that's specific to where this is. Dan and Nick stand up for the rule of law. That's about Republican Senator Dan Sullivan and Republican Congressman Nick Begich, both of whom have been very pro-Trump, even as Alaska's other Republican representative in Congress, Senator Lisa Murkowski, has mildly criticized him. But Dan and Nick, hey, stand up. And I just want to say, for whatever reason, it wasn't just the big turnout they got in Anchorage. There were a ton of protests all over Alaska this time. Gustavus, Alaska, population 600 something. That's a significant portion of the town. There's only 600 people in the town. Soldotna, Alaska, all along the main drag there, people outside the AutoZone. Bethel, Alaska. It was really cold and rainy, but people turned out in Bethel, Alaska. Look at the turnout in Fairbanks, Alaska. Fairbanks had tons of people turn out this weekend. At Nome, Alaska, Nome, Nome. Protesters posted up there again at the marker for the end of the Iditarod sled dog race. You see the sign there, stop disappearing people. A lot of signs along those lines. In protests we saw everywhere all over the country. Kodiak, Alaska, another good turnout there. Lots of American flags. United we stand, divided we fall.
You see, is Trump being protested by young people, being protested by students, by activists, by workers, everyone, saying, Donald, we're not going to let you ruin our life without a fight. You were elected, and again, we know this, right? Trump was elected. I know that makes me want to retch even having to say it. Trump was elected with a specific mandate. His mandate wasn't very big. His popular vote win was smaller than Hillary's was in 2016 in terms of percentage of the vote and the amount of like the margin between the two opponents. But he did have a mandate to lower prices. And to be fair, to do something with the border, but not what he's doing. And so what did he do? He came in and he started violating civil liberties, violating due process, and doing everything he could to ruin working class lives. He did not have a mandate, guys, to do the cuts he's doing. If anything, he has an anti-mandate because Project 2025, which is what Trump is largely doing, was exposed during the campaign. And Trump said, not only will I not do it, he wasn't just ignoring it. He made an affirmative saying, I'm not going to do it. I don't like a lot of the things in the platform. That's not mine. Other people are doing it. I don't even know a lot of them. And all of that was a lie, obviously. But when he built his mandate again and won over people, it was to lower prices, not to cut services, not to attack universities, not to expel students, not to violate the due process of people. And that's why people are protesting. Not only because they disagree with Trump, but because he betrayed and defrauded the American people.